6 engines go to full thrust, and the air behind them turns to a wall of noise. 600 tons gather speed down 3 kilometers of concrete. 32 wheels leave the ground almost reluctantly, and a spaceplane rides into the sky on the back of an airplane. Nothing this heavy has ever flown. To understand that machine, rewind to the 1980s and to a problem of pure geography. The Soviet Union was building a reusable spaceplane called Buran and a colossal rocket called Mriya. Their parts were made in factories scattered across a continent. They had to reach a launch site in the Kazakh desert. The rocket's tanks were too wide for any tunnel, any bridge, any rail wagon. On the ground, they were immovable. The only route left was the air, and no aircraft in the world had ever been asked to carry something strapped to its spine that was larger than the aircraft's own fuselage. There was a stopgap. Engineers converted an old strategic bomber into the VMT Atlant, a strange humpbacked carrier that flew tank sections lashed above its fuselage. It worked, but it was slow, it was limited in weight, and it could not lift the heaviest pieces of all. Something far larger was needed. The task went to the Antonov Design Bureau in Kyiv. Antonov had spent decades building the Soviet Union's heavy lifters and had just produced the An-124 Ruslan, at the time the largest production aircraft in the world, with a hold you could drive tanks into through a nose that swung open. The fastest path to a giant was not a blank sheet. It was to take the Ruslan and grow it, lengthen the fuselage, insert a new center section into the wing, add a pair of engines, strengthen everything that now carried far more load. The design that emerged was called An-225 Mriya, Ukrainian for dream. One change was unmistakable. The Ruslan has a single tall fin. The Mriya has 2, mounted on the tips of a horizontal tailplane. A cargo riding on the aircraft's back sheds a wide, turbulent wake straight down the center line. Move the fins out of that wake, and the airplane can still be controlled. The wing spans just over 88 meters tip to tip, the widest wing on any aircraft that has ever entered service. Its area is close to 900 square meters. That vast surface is what allows the machine to leave the ground at a weight the rest of aviation simply does not attempt. Beneath that wing hang 6 Progress D-18 turbofans, each producing roughly 230 kilonewtons of thrust. Together, they make well over 1,000,000 newtons. Big fans, moving enormous volumes of air relatively slowly, the efficient way to push a heavy, subsonic machine across 4,000 kilometers. Then, there is the problem of putting 640 tons back onto the Earth without breaking it. The answer is 32 wheels, on many separate legs, spreading the load so the aircraft can use ordinary runways. The nose gear steers. The whole aircraft can kneel forward to lower its ramp. Inside, the cargo hold runs more than 43 meters from the nose to the rear bulkhead, over 6 meters wide and more than 4 meters high. Put it another way, the first powered airplane flight in history at Kitty Hawk covered less ground than the length of this aircraft's cargo bay. Loading is a piece of engineering in itself. The entire nose hinges upward. The aircraft lowers its front onto its knees, ramps go down, and machinery is winched in along the floor. Unlike its smaller sibling, the Mriya has no rear door. The back of the fuselage carries the loads of the tail. The Mriya was rolled out of its Kiev assembly hall at the end of 1988. On the 21st of December that year, it flew for the first time. Witnesses described the same thing, not speed, but slowness, a shape so large the eye refused to believe it was moving at all. Within months, it was rewriting the record books. On a single flight in 1989, it set more than 100 recognized world aviation records, lifting a payload of over 150 tons. No aircraft had ever carried so much so high, and no aircraft has since matched it. In May 1989 came the flight it had been designed for. The Buran orbiter was hoisted onto 3 mounting struts along the Mriya's spine, and the pair flew to the Baikonur Cosmodrome. 2 of the largest flying machines ever built joined into one improbable silhouette. A month later, the combination appeared at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget. For Western engineers, it was a first close look at the scale of Soviet heavy aviation. The Mriya taxied past the crowd line with a spaceplane on its back, and for a moment, the Cold War looked like an exhibition. Then, the reason for its existence disappeared. Buran had flown once unmanned in 1988 and never flew again. The program was starved of money and formally ended in 1993. The Soviet Union that had ordered a six-engine giant no longer existed. The Mriya was parked at Hostomel airfield outside Kiev and left. Its engines were taken off and used to keep the smaller An-124 fleet flying. For most of the 1990s, the largest aircraft in the world sat still, weathering, a masterpiece with nothing left to carry. But the world was changing around it. Independent Ukraine inherited Antonov, and Antonov Airlines had found a business no one else could do. Flying cargo too big for any other airplane. Demand for outsize airlift kept rising, and in a hangar sat the only machine that could double the limit. Restoration began at the turn of the millennium. New engines were fitted. The flight deck was rebuilt around modern navigation and communications equipment so the aircraft could work in international airspace. Structures were inspected, repaired, and certified for a civil life its designers had never planned. On the 7th of May, 2001, the Mriya flew again. It came back not as a space program servant, but as a commercial freighter, the only aircraft on Earth able to accept a single object weighing 200 tons and simply fly away with it. Its record book filled with objects most of us never think about. In 2009, it flew a power station generator weighing more than 180 tons from Germany to Armenia, the heaviest single item ever carried by air, one piece, indivisible, urgently needed. It carried wind turbine blades over 40 meters long, mining trucks, locomotives, transformers, oil field equipment, bridge sections, and aircraft parts. If it fitted through the nose, it could go. That single hold reshaped what heavy industry considered possible on a deadline. Understand the economics, and the machine makes sense. Sea freight is far cheaper and can carry far more. But a ship takes weeks, needs a port, and cannot reach a landlocked construction site. When a power station or a mine is losing money every day, an airplane the size of a building becomes rational. It also became something rarer for a freight aircraft, famous. Crowds gathered in airport fences wherever it landed. In 2020, it flew medical supplies out of China as the pandemic spread, and millions watched a Soviet-designed giant deliver cargo to countries that no longer existed when it was drawn. There was almost a second one. A partly built airframe had been left in a Kiev hangar when the Soviet program collapsed. A fuselage and wing sections, structurally incomplete, waiting for money that never came. For 30 years it stood there, the world's largest unfinished aeroplane. In February 2022, the Mriya was at Hostomel, inside its hangar, undergoing maintenance. Hostomel is roughly 25 kilometers from central Kyiv. It has a runway long enough for the largest aircraft in the world, which made it, on the 24th of February, a military objective. The airfield was assaulted from the air and then fought over. The hangar was hit and burned. When the area was retaken, what remained was a shattered structure, a collapsed roof, and beneath it, the wreckage of the only An-225 ever completed. Its nose and forward fuselage were destroyed. Antonov confirmed the loss. Some assemblies survived. Engines, sections of structure, the wing outboard of the fire. But an aircraft is not a parts list. The jigs, the tooling, the supply chains, and many of the people who built it in 1988 belonged to a country that had ceased to exist. Ukraine has said it intends to build a second Mriya, using the airframe that waited 3 decades in that Kiev hangar. Estimates of the cost run into hundreds of millions of dollars, and no date has been fixed. Whether it flies will depend on money, on peace, and on will. For 33 years, there was exactly one of these in the world. It was built for a spaceplate that flew once, outlived the state that ordered it, and spent its second life carrying the pieces of the modern world that cannot be cut in half. Mriya means dream. Only one was ever finished, and for a while, it flew.